Hello, loves. Welcome to this solo edition of Sensual Sovereignty Burn the Box on this Aries full moon. Oh, hello, Deepika. I I'm like 15 minutes after the hour, which is making me laugh because that's one thing about when I do these lives with someone else is that I have to be on time. And for myself, I clearly just showed up when I felt ready. So here I am. I really enjoy, I want to say that I really enjoy this Instagram live series that I've been doing this year that started in February with Cosmos MD and then just kind of took on a life of its own. It was so fun it has been so fun to connect with so many different people from all over the globe. We've had Pavitra in India, we've had Natasha in Australia. I've definitely been in Canada, Mexico. So it's been really amazing. And what I'd love to do is what I'm in the process of doing really, which is why I haven't had an Instagram live, I think for a month now, is making it into more of a podcast. So I just feel like I'm just feeling really called to that. Oh, hello, Noi. I just feel like a podcast would be a great place to have all of these conversations be kept there for a while. Oh, Jessica. Oh, I'm just feeling so touched by people, even if you're just popping in here just to say hello. I really appreciate that. Because as I was doing this, like, honestly, yesterday, I'm like, is anyone really going to show up to this? It's just me. I'm not talking to anyone else. And it's not like I have a whole lot planned, although some ideas came this morning of things I wanted to share. So I think that I've been learning a lot. I haven't been posting much on Instagram, and I've just been taking some time to kind of regroup a little bit, reevaluate, and just see how to best share this work. How do I want to show up? What do I want to offer? And I think what I have found with the Instagram live, it's fun. I do like it. Like, I like being here, and I love when I'm talking to someone else or we're having some kind of conversation. We can just drop in and let it flow. But it seems like a place where people just are scrolling a lot, as I do as well. I've been, like I said, taking a little break from it. But I think podcast feels like a space where people will go to actually listen and to take in the whole thing. So stay tuned for that. And if you have any thoughts on that, I'm really open to that too. It would be still fun to do some lives because it is really fun. So what did I want to share? What I was thinking about, because this whole series, Sensual Sovereignty, Burn the Box, that came from Cosmos, my first guest, this whole idea of embodied love, liberation, and the license to expand the expression of our true essence, that still really calls to me. And how when we do this, we expand out of boxes. We can burn boxes or leave them, or however you want to think about it. In this series, so many of the people I've talked to have had like their own expression of what that means to them, and so it can mean so much. It can mean that these boxes were in. Raji, who who I spoke to. Oh, another country. She was in England. Me now also in England. So we're global. This is a global series. I love that. I feel very global myself, having been born in England, lived in the U.S., raised in the U.S., and lived there a long time. Here in Mexico, roots in Sri Lanka. So this is so global, and I appreciate that. But this idea of like, I know Raji talked about self-emulating boxes, right? Like we have a box that we're in a box, and it has perhaps a time, like a time frame, and then it will just like burn on its own. Like we have to move into some other box. You know, we're not meant to be in one box for too long. So what I had wanted to talk about a little bit is to share a bit of my journey and to share it from a place of decision making in my life as a way of sharing part of my journey, but also this process that I'm finding so interesting as I work with others, especially with melanated beings, which is my passion. Hello everyone. As I get to have these conversations, work with them, connect with people, and find out how people have navigated their journey. This is I think it's so important. It's also something I'm really passionate about as I'll share, as it got deeper into focusing on a pleasure journey, a pleasure path, as I've been calling like the pleasure pathfinders that I'm, calling in, just like how does that weave in? So I wanted to share, we'll see how this goes. I wanted to share like 4 decisions, and the last 3 are in the last 6 years. But the first one that I wanted to share goes back a long ways to 1997 it was actually. So that just came to me this morning. Like, let me just share this first decision that was important in my life. And as I share, the whole point is to share a bit about how the decision making shifted and how my life changed as well as a result. How it shifted from being very rational, mental, all of this like logical, right? To more heart-centered, more body-centered. And in this work I've been doing with sensuality, sexuality, more pussy-centered, we can say as well. Like really getting deep into our bodies. And allowing from that space the decision making to happen. Yes, Jessica. But this first decision back in 1997, so good Lord, I don't even do math. It was a while ago, 25 years ago, right? So I, at that time, was finishing college, but I kind of had this extra semester. I could have graduated and then it would have been 4 years, but depression is a thread through my life as well. So I had a really severe depressive episode during college, took that time off. So really it would have been 3.5 semesters. And so I took it upon myself, like, I'm going to go study abroad and kind of stretch this a little bit. And I also wanted to have fun and wanted to explore, and I didn't at all speak another language. So I was kind of England, Australia. This is where I was thinking of. And then I thought, Australia sounds really cool to go there. And my mother recommended Melbourne because we have relatives there. And that ended up being a lifesaver for me with what ended up happening. So I chose Melbourne. So I go to Melbourne. I have done all my pre-medical stuff, like all the classes, taken the exams, took the MCAT twice, and actually that was probably the last time that I did like really well on an exam, pretty much, was the second time I took the MCAT. So I was primed for this, like, I'm going to go to medical school, but I'm going to take this time, explore Australia, have a little bit of extra time, and then join. So I was giving myself a little bit of a break, only to find out that once I got to Australia, it did not go how I had expected. This is another theme probably in my life, of me having expectations for things and then it not going quite right. And not going to go into all of that, but it was just like I wasn't clicking with people as well. It's very different in Australia than it is in the U.S. when it comes to universities. And again, this is going back 25 years. But it was like in Australia, and especially in a big city like Melbourne, a lot of the students just went from home. They lived at home and went to school. And this is very different from my experience of undergrad in the U.S., where we go and we stay around the campus and it's this whole thing. You know, my plant is like trying to attack me. Okay. So it was a totally different experience. So I'm on this campus, and oh, hi Genevieve. And then I'm with all these people, but it was like very small, kind of a small group that stayed on the campus. And I'm not going to go into all that. Long story short, it just wasn't working for me. I wasn't having fun. I got really depressed again. So I had been in one severe episode in college, and this was another really severe episode. So it was like three years had gone by. Luckily, I had my family. Luckily, I had my aunt, who is still there, she's in her 90s now. She's amazing. She's a retired doctor, and then her children. She's 2 daughters, 2 sons. I got close to her 2 daughters, and I ended up leaving the campus, and I was living at their house, and just kind of hanging on with a couple of classes. But it was one of those times. It's like, what am I doing? Why am I here? And now I'm having this episode that I'm going through, but I don't have any of my support. Like it was really tough, because at least when I had before, I had my family and I had some friends, and I was in Illinois, where I had, spent so much of my life, and it was a little bit better. But here I'm like off in another country. I did seek out help, was always good about that. And I do think there's a lot of conditioning in that as well. As probably if you've heard any of my story, but fast forward a little bit, maybe only like 3 years though, is when my younger brother took his life. So I just say that because I recognize in my own journey, I think we have struggled with very similar kinds of things, but I was able to ask for help and go for help, and it was more acceptable, I think, too. So here I was getting help, and then all of these applications were coming in for medical school, like these secondary applications, because I'd done the beginning part and went and expected like kind of a smooth, like my plan was to just have fun and be there, and then do these applications and come back and go to medical school, or whatever. But that was not the case. So all these applications were getting FedExed from the U.S. and they were all these essays of like my life and blah blah blah. I couldn't do any of them. I just looked at them. I was like, okay, I'm not doing these. I just knew wasn't in the right space to write about my life in any way that would have been positive or optimistic. So I didn't do any of them. And I just I was a bit lost. That's another theme of being lost in my life. So I was a bit lost, and I just thought, I just need to get through this. I mean, literally it was pretty bad. So I really just needed to get through the time. And I could have come home earlier, but I stayed. and at the end, I did get to see more of Australia, and it's beautiful. And I did meet people that I got to be friends with, but it was not easy, and it was not what I expected. And so I was just thinking, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing with my life. Like for many years, it had been medicine, it had been pre-med and all those things. This whole path, medicine is such a path. It's like you have to plan it, and there's so many requirements, and there's so many hurdles, and so many times along the way I'm like, this is not for me, this is too hard, like I don't think I want to do it. But here was that last hurdle, and I didn't do the application. So finally it comes time to end my time, because I did stay the whole 6 months. So I'm about to come back, and I remember it was close to Thanksgiving, because the semesters, their fall semester started in the summer or whatever. So anyway, in the summer in the West. So I come back, and even before I left, my dad is telling me, "Oh, University of Illinois wants to interview you." It just felt weird. I didn't do any of these. I didn't finish any of the applications, just the initial one. That is just like a standard one. So I go back, and I'm feeling a bit better by that time for sure. And I decide to go for this interview, not really knowing why they wanted to interview me, because I didn't finish any of the things. But it went fine, and they accepted me, and it was just a surprise, is what I'll say. It was not, I thought I was going to have to rethink my whole plan. Nothing had worked out. I didn't do any of the applications. What was I going to do? And, it was many years ago, but it just so happened that they accepted me. And I kind of did the second part, like after they had accepted me. I just filled it out to make it complete. And I said I wanted to be in Chicago, and it was a decision. I guess there's a few points in this. One is that there's a lot of luck in this. It's like there are things that happen, as I'm sure many of you know, like it's luck. I mean, I don't know how that all happened, but it was luck. None of these other places would offer me an interview because I didn't finish it. I didn't finish the process. And I got an opportunity, and I ended up saying yes to that. And then it was like suddenly my life had a bit more purpose, focus, structure. I was doing much better. I was able to do a little bit more traveling before I started medical school, because there was some months that I could, before it was starting. And it was a decision. It's interesting because I wasn't at that time I can tell you, like, I wasn't very connected to my body or what was going on at that time, for sure. So I think this decision was just like a rational decision, logical, like, oh, okay, here it is. Here's the opportunity. You got accepted. And I just said yes and went with it. So that was the first decision that I wanted to share. And then we'll fast forward. So now I will share, in my second year, after my second year of medical school, my younger brother took his life. It's devastating. So again, depression is a theme. What happened with him, and then what's happened in my life too. Navigating a lot. Medical school was actually a very difficult time. I failed so many things. I never used to fail things. I did pretty well in school. I did fine. I didn't have a lot of problems, and I was in a great, I didn't have great study habits. I would cram a lot. I would procrastinate. Another theme. But I did okay. And then I got to medical school, and it was a whole different world. It was way too much information. You could not cram. I failed so many things. And there was a chance to learn how to deal with failure and things like that. So I'm struggling in med school. My brother dies. My whole world, like, shattered at that point. He's my only sibling. And I rededicate myself to the field of psychiatry eventually. It happened over a little time because it was not my plan to become a psychiatrist. So I'm going to fast forward now, many years. So I did become a psychiatrist. I became a child psychiatrist. I worked for university, got burnt out there, worked for a different organization, got burnt out there. And finally, in this process, I have become more passionate about integrative medicine, holistic medicine. I learned about Ayurveda. That was about 10 years ago. And I was following that a little bit, taking classes, different things. And then I get this opportunity to go to Sri Lanka. So this came from my mother's friend, close friend, childhood friend, who that family owns all these Ayurvedic resorts. And that was a yes. You know what? That might have been one of the beginnings, before I did any of this sensuality work or embodiment work, that I made a decision that did seem more like body centered a little bit, because this email came from her and it was super long. And I just remember reading the beginning of it and knowing that my whole life was going to change, because she was in this email really beautifully inviting me to come there and to take time off that I hadn't taken before, and to learn Ayurveda and to explore my roots as well in that country. And I couldn't even read it all. So I do think that was the inklings of a deeper decision making, like one that wasn't totally rational. But I will say that looking back, if that hadn't been about Ayurveda and healing in a way that made sense to me, because I had been studying it for a while, I might not have said yes, because it did involve, it was big, and I did it in a big way. I didn't just put my condo for sublease it or something and create it in such a way that if it didn't work out, I'd just come back and be there in Chicago. It was I moved everything out. We ended up selling the condo, left a job. So I really did leave in a bigger way, where I didn't have any cushion to come back to. I was leaving. And some part of me just knew it was just time to leave, and then to see what happened. And I had this idea that I would go back to Chicago and do more integrative medicine or something like that. So that was a really big decision, and I do think it was the start. It was the start of I was recognizing the burnout. I was recognizing something had to change in my life, and I was answering a call, and just responding to an invitation. So there were three more decisions I want to share, and I've gone and talked already quite a bit, and I have, so maybe 10 more minutes I have to talk about this. Okay, so I get to Sri Lanka. I've left everything. For me, it was big, it was just this untethering from people, responsibilities, places that are familiar, family, all of this. There were family in Sri Lanka, but that was a whole different thing. And again, the expectations I had, the ideas I had for what this could be on this beautiful Ayurvedic resort. I mean, I highly recommend it. It was on the beach, and now they have 4. Pretty sure they have 4 different ones, Barbaran resorts, just beautiful. All of that was amazing, but the work wasn't really calling to me, and there were reasons for that. It was cultural and trying to learn in a way that I wanted to be so holistic, spiritual, energetic, emotional, and it was seeming to be very physical. It was my first experience of colonization. It was not first, but it was a clear experience of colonization with this 5,000-year-old tradition of healing. So it really wasn't, it just wasn't calling to me. So this is where I start to get connected to another teacher, Layla Martin, who I've now been working with for so many years, but she was doing a lot of work with sexuality. And so this is where this came from. After I had left everything, was like, oh my gosh, I want to focus on this now finally in my life. Of something that had not been a focus, had not been a priority, it just hadn't been there in my life at all, very much at all. So I do a little course. It was like she had these smaller courses with like an 8-week course. It was really good. And then I come to another decision, which I have talked about before. And that was to decide whether to go to an Ayurvedic training in India with this renowned doctor who I had met in the US, and do this 6-week training in Ayurveda in India with this possibility of this might be more of what I was looking for that I wasn't finding at the resort. Or do I go to Mexico and do this retreat with Layla called Wild Bliss? Well, this was one of the bigger decisions where I can tell you, like, the shift was happening, and it was happening after I got into this embodiment work, this sensuality work, this sexuality work, this like really connecting to like what I was mentioning in the beginning, this heart-centered, body-centered, pussy-based actions, desires and actions. So it was like suddenly my body was taking over, and it was like, yeah, go to Mexico. And my mind and all the logic and the whole reason I had come to Sri Lanka, the whole purpose of that was to learn about Ayurveda and to have that whole experience. And here it was, and I had to apply, it wasn't like it was that so easy, but I gotten accepted to go to India, go to 6 weeks, or go to a 1-week retreat in Mexico, Wild Bliss. So I ended up doing it. And I waited and waited and waited. It felt so confusing. It felt so confusing because there was such a conflict happening in my being, I'll say, because the logic, the rational thinking, all of that was like, oh, I love it. Yeah, all of that was like, hey, you go to India. Like, that makes sense. You came all the way here. You're a doctor. You're going to learn from a doctor. And this is what you want to learn. I love that, Jessica. Returning home is the best healing modality. Yes. And that's what it was. Thank you for sharing that, Jessica. It's like coming home into my body. And like the body just, it was so clear. You go to Mexico, even though it made no sense at all. So this was a big shift for me, was that decision, because it brought me to Mexico. It brought me into this work, which made no sense. That also made no sense. It brought me to this town that I've now lived in at a stretch for 4 years, just about 4 years. And I came here to visit a friend, but that was only after going to that retreat. And I've made so many of these body-based decisions here in this town. Like, this was where I decided to do a coaching program that didn't make any sense to my logic, to my rational thinking. And I'll share kind of quickly these 2 decisions that also were made here in this town. One was to stay here, like 4 years ago, because I came thinking I was coming for just a month. And I sat like in this main square in this town and just felt it in my body. Like, no, you're going to stay here. You need to stay here. And I had a whole job waiting in the US. It was a part-time job telepsychiatry like a couple of days a week, but I was going to do that while I worked on the coaching and all of this. And the decision was no, no, you're staying here. And it was a good decision for me. And here I am. It's been 4 years. And the last decision, I'm rushing the end here, but the last decision just happened very recently. And that's what I wanted to mention. And that decision was maybe in the last couple of months, but last week I taught my last class in this membership of this teacher, Leila Martin, who I'm so grateful for, because she got me here, and she got me on this work, and she got me on this path that I needed to be on. Like, that path feels so good to me. And it was the decision to leave that space after being in it for so long, because I was a student, and I was a mentor, and then I've been a teacher in some capacity for the last 3 years. And it just came as a decision of, it's time to leave that space and really be fully present in my own business, in my own work, where I've been influenced by so many teachers. I'll just mention a few, but Resmaa Menakem, who has taught me about somatic abolitionism. That's been part of my life the last couple of years. Doctora Rocio Rosales Mesa, who's taught me so much about decolonial healing and decolonial alchemy. My good friend who's also such a support and a mentor to me, Nika Carly, who I met through Layla's Space. I met some amazing people in Layla's Space. I'm so grateful for that. And more recently, there's been a teacher, an Indian teacher, Manasi Kakade. She's not on Instagram. She's only on TikTok. And I found her through another group I did, a program I did in the summer. But she teaches on the connection between science and spirit, and also the decolonial way of understanding the 7th chakra, which has been eye-opening to me, because I'm realizing that everything I've been taught has been colonized. Everything I've taught has been so rational and not body-based, heart-centered, pussy-centered. So this is what I wanted to share today. Thank you for being here. This is what I wanted to share, because doing this work, getting connected to my body, which was huge. I didn't have any idea. I was just making all these decisions from all my conditioning, from all the rational, what do people think? What should I be doing? What ought I to be doing? And it's been a huge, huge shift to connect to my body, to connect to my truth, to find the right teachers, the people who showed up when they did. Alicia, yes, I will. Thank you for asking to share any good upcoming retreats or courses. I will. I'm kind of, I'm just taking a little time. I don't have a lot coming up for this fall and winter. I have all these ideas. I do want to have my own membership. I was working in this membership for two plus years, really, from the time they started asking me to teach classes in there. And they're beautiful classes, like embodiment classes, healing classes, pleasure classes. And I really want to have something which I'm calling the pleasure sanctuary. These are all my ideas. I'll share some ideas that are not to fruition yet, but this is what's been coming through recently, is to have like 2 or 3 classes a month and have it be something that's low cost. I just want it to be accessible for people to experience. I do have Become a Pleasure Pathfinder. It's in my bio. It's free. It's like an hour long where I share a little of my story, a little glimpse of what I've created as the Pleasure Temple. So it has a little bit of pleasure portal, like a little bit of sharing, teaching, erotic embodiment. Oh wait, I'm getting confused. Pleasure Pathfinder gives a whole kind of overview, and it does have an embodiment practice, and it's free, and you don't have to. I just took it away from, like, you don't have to even give your email or anything. Like, later if you want to, you can, but I just wanted it to be accessible. And then there's a short workshop that's like 2 hours. That's like $11 or something, and that's called Erotic Embodiment, Seduction of the Melanated Spirit. That is a little taste of the Pleasure Temple. So Pleasure Portal for a little bit of sharing. I share some of this journey that you've heard today. There is an erotic embodiment practice. There's a bit of what I call like sensual alchemy session where I answered questions from those that attended, and then sacred grounding. So this is kind of an arc of the work, is to share in this way so that we allow our minds to be involved, because it's important. As much as I'm talking about getting to body work and somatic and pussy and heart and all this, if our minds don't understand what's happening, it doesn't work. Our minds really need to be on board. Be like, okay, this is why we're doing this. And then we can have the mind just stay out of it for a bit while we get into something more embodied. So this is kind of the arc of that. What else can I say is coming? I am creating a more intensive one-on-one journey that's like a 3-month Pleasure Temple intensive. And that's to really stay with this process, like to dive in, but to go at a pace that, meeting each person where they're at, of course, always, allowing for integration, always, and also having a pace and a consistency, like 3 sessions a month, so that we can really get into the journey, because everybody's on their own path, on their own pace, on their own journey. And the idea being also that we can help to navigate the resistance that comes up, because as I've very much discovered over and over and over again, the resistance will come up when we hit another layer, when we get deeper into this work. And Rooted Rapture, so that's with some it's going to have some recorded content, and that'll be like a group. So that's a lot of things. That's a lot of things, Alicia. So, but you can start with the Become a Pleasure Pathfinder. It's free. It's an hour. That goes for anyone. And, it feels really good to be fully focused in this work, and fully serving the people that I feel called to serve. Because that has been a whole journey for me. Because I started with just like, I'm gonna just serve all women, and I am passionate about that. But as I've gotten, like I mentioned, working with these teachers, it's helped me to see like who I'm really here for. For melanated beings, there's so much in addition to everything else. Because being in a womb-based body, in a female body, we are already holding all kinds of suppression, repression, oppression, patriarchy, and everything. And then there's the added layers that come with being in melanated bodies that I'm really passionate about. And it's even I realize it's even a challenge, kind of a challenge to speak to the people that I want to work with, because I think of myself 5-6 years ago, and I would not have paid attention to anything that was like, oh, pleasure based, or a pleasure journey, or a pleasure path, or erotic embodiment. No, I was very much stuck in like work and, well, mainly work basically, but it's taken a lot for me to find this connection that was really missing for me before. And I think it's missing for a lot of women, for good reason, because we've never been told to focus on pleasure, to focus on our bodies, to focus on what feels good, to let our bodies really guide us, to prioritize pleasure, to claim pleasure. So, thank you all for being here. So much gratitude, and stay tuned. I'll be sharing more, but just a place to start. Yeah, just go to my bio and become a pleasure pathfinder. It's free. You don't have to even give me your email. Just allow for an hour to go through that and to get a little more introduction to the work. Thank you all. So much love. Bye.